Now, what could it be that could make all of us gentle souls, school teachers, what could get us so riled up? Well, of course, it's the Common Core standards and the tests that are coming behind them. Should we watch that again? I'm really proud of that animation. Well, I'm sort of making light of the Park and Smarter balance, but there's nothing funny about it because we know we're going to get at least 5 years of dramatically lower test scores, right? Just like what happened in New York a couple weeks ago, the Park and Smarter balance are already warning us that, and I'm thinking, I'm 65, I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking, okay, another year till they implement it, and then 5 years of horror before we can even think about pulling ourselves. It's a little bit scary. So anyway, here's the Common Core. And I love how they represent themselves. There's only two things you can be, adopted and not yet adopted, right? Resistance is futile. We will get you. Let me tell you something. I work in Texas a lot. There is no way they're getting Texas. However, right, Ellen and I were looking this up this morning, and there's at least 10 states now that are considering some kind of withdrawal from some part of the Common Core. Right? And it's very interesting because it's an ultra-right thing and it's a left thing too. There's this strange bedfellows resistance that's kind of bubbling up. What longevity it has, what power it has, we don't know yet, but it's quite an interesting phenomenon. So there's my favorite superintendent, and he's saying, we are raising the bar. He's always saying that, we're raising the bar. Maybe it's just me, maybe I just have this kindergarten attitude, but when he says that stuff, it looks like this to me. It's like so far, so high. How can I do it? And I want to say some positive things here. I mean, there are some opportunities in the Common Core, and what Ellen was just talking about was how can we exploit those? How can we turn this into an opportunity to take back our teaching, take back our autonomy? And I think, we could argue they're potentially unifying if people are dealing with the same standards. They provide clear expectations, at least up to a point, they do. They have consistency across grades and regions if you move around. It does call for rich and challenging materials. I'll say in a minute, I think it goes overboard with challenging and complexity, but at least that. And these are mostly the language arts ones because this is my world and this is what I know a little bit about. It's calling for more nonfiction, more real world, more informational text, which I think is great. And I have said for years, and very unpopularly in my home base of language arts and reading, that we needed to shift the balance. The kids really needed to be reading more nonfiction in school, especially as they go through. So I think that's great. I'm sorry, we got to the scary slide there way too fast. At least in name, it leaves pedagogy to teachers. It leaves us a great big opening to decide how we're going to meet these standards. It calls for students to be more active, I think, to take more responsibility. And it recognizes that we have to set up ladders or staircases or something through the year to get to the standards. So, the standards for 9th grade aren't the standards for September 1st of 9th grade, they're end of the year standards, right? And the whole package is career and college readiness standards. So now, rigor, this word rigor gets thrown around. Yeah, dude, can I have my joke? Would you kill me for me to have? No, I know, I'm not the first one thinking, but I hear all this rigor. And maybe it's just me, but I think that has some negative connotations. Let's look it up in the dictionary. Rigor, the quality of inflexibility, harshness of judgment, strictness, and sternness. Yeah, that's what's going to really get the kids excited, right? More rigor. And yes, the mortis is always there. Even if you don't say it, it's a deep connotation. And by the way, I don't think these people who wrote these standards use these words by accident. Right? Remember we used to have persuasive writing? Hey, let's do some persuasive writing, boys and girls. Let's persuade some people. Now it's argumentative. Now we're going to learn how to argue. We're all pirates now. Argumentative, right? So, again, I don't think those words get chosen by randomly. It's like, there we are again. And then we have this, this text complexity stuff. Should we all read this out loud, or you want me to? But, so it seems reasonable. Whatever they're reading, students must show a steadily growing ability to discern more from and make fuller use of text, including making an increasing number of connections among ideas and between texts, considering a wider range of textual evidence, and becoming more sensitive to inconsistencies, ambiguities, and poor reasoning text. Okay, that's good, right? That would be a good thing for kids. So here's a passage the juniors are supposed to be able to read. And remember, cold, right? Cold. No in the original, now this is all being negotiated, but we weren't supposed to pre-teach, not tell them who the author is, not the time period, not just throw this in. They believe that all the meaning of any text lies within the four corners of the text on the page, right? That's it. No prior knowledge needed. It's completely insane. It's just completely has no cognitive basis of any sort. But anyway, let's play along. Let's read this text, which is in the Common Core Standards, an exemplar text for juniors in high school. Can you all see that? You want the 2-page version? I think you can. Got it? Ready for the test? See, here we are, we've got whatever it is, 100 highly qualified professional educators, count up the graduate degrees. It's just as hard as it can be, right? And you could probably read this over and over again, repeated readings. At some point, if you don't know the time period, if I told you it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, if I told you it was Transcendentalist, if I told you the book was called Society and Solitude, it's the other way around, Solitude and Society, then you could begin to make something out of it, maybe. But yeah, so I created a statistic that nobody's ever done before. I went and figured out the average copyright date of all the recommended exemplar texts in the appendix of the Common Core, right? I did this on the first version when they first came out. So there have been a few little substitutions. But I thought this was kind of interesting. I had the feeling that it was really profoundly embracing a dead white male curriculum. Just an intuition, And so, and also, the dead part, so we can validate the dead part. So for K1 literature, the average copyright date of a book any of the books that are recommended for kindergarten kids is 1963. There have been a couple pretty good books for primary kids that have come out since 1963, just a couple. For 4 or 5 literature, the average copyright date is 1937. For 6 to 8 nonfiction, 1895. For 9 to 10 literature, 1801 is the average copyright date of the exemplar text in the Common Core. And finally, high school nonfiction, 1897. Now, on the face of that, you simply cannot deny that this is a retrograde curriculum. And sure, they've got letter from the Birmingham jail in there, but that's about it. You know what I mean? So there's some serious problems with this. But one of the things that we know, of course, is that we don't have to teach those texts. We have to teach texts of similar challenge or complexity. So it's still, this is the way we seize back our autonomy. We say, you're not going to assign Emerson maybe, but I'm going to substitute that with something equally challenging, equally complex. So, but what Deborah Meyer says deserves some notice here. No student should be expected to meet an academic requirement that a cross-section of successful adults in the community cannot. Right? And that means every politician who's pontificating about this stuff should sit down and take the test first and have their score published in the newspaper, just like you do, right? So, but I've been at this a long time. Did I mention I was old? Yeah. I think this goes back at least to this Nation at Risk report, 1984. Some of my gray-haired buddies are nodding. But basically that said the exact same thing. It was our nation's going to have economic collapse unless we make school more tedious, harsh, mechanical, boring. Those were the words I used. They didn't say that. I said that. So it's truth in advertising, you know. Then we got No Child Left Behind, right? Happy birthday to you, 11 years, I guess, now, something like that, 11th or 12th year. We know what the outcomes of that are. Kids are back in straight rows, you know, doing worksheets, doing test prep all day long. And Bob Pianta did a study this, actually 6 years in, and what they found was, and this is just one grade, there are many grades that were similar, sixth graders now spending 91% of their time either listening to a teacher talk or doing commercially prepared seat work, most of which was test prep, right? Now, if you'd done that study 10 years earlier, I think you still would have seen some kids doing some projects. They might have been working in teams. There might have been a teeny bit of inquiry, maybe some book clubs. But we've been pushed back into this old, I feel we're still at risk of being pushed back into these old school configurations. And of course, it's the testing that does it. This is a poster I saw in a very high need school in Chicago that some adults had compelled the children to make and hang in the hall. It says, "Don't listen to people, you are ready for the ISAT." And I can't imagine how you could create a more negative experience for children than to make them make that poster, which basically says, when people talk about you, they think you're pretty stupid, but maybe you could catch a break, you know? Kids don't like this test prep curriculum either, right? It's not fun for them. No matter what age kids you teach or taught, wherever they are, we see a lot of this when it's test-centric disengagement, sometimes full disengagement or full disengagement of classes, right? So here's the problem. To me, is what's potentially missing in this CCSS Common Core world that's aborting. Here's what I'm afraid of. Number one is engagement. You know, if kids aren't mentally present, what can happen? Curiosity is certainly not being evoked. God almighty, I love that we can just talk turkey in here, it's so cool. But, you know, even David Coleman's own organization, you know, Achieve the Core, go look at the lesson plans they're peddling. Here's my favorite one, Living Like Weasels. There's an Annie Dillard essay called Living Like Weasels, which is an essay that's suitable for middle-aged adults who subscribe to Vanity Fair like me. Nobody else can read this at all. But the lesson plan it's a 3-page article, 5 days. 5 days on a 3-page article with a possible 5 more days extension. So you could spend 2 weeks on this. And every single day, here's what happens. You know, the teacher reads a section of it aloud, then the kids read it silently, and then the teacher peppers the kids with questions. The next day they come and they do the next few paragraphs. That's it. Just stand and deliver, old school, So anyway, that's not getting kids curious. There's nothing about baiting the hook in those lesson plans. Kids aren't making any choices, and I don't think they're being asked to take any responsibility. One of the main things we do in these teacher-led schools is we hand over a lot of responsibility to kids, right? Make some choices, make decisions, form your teams, do your inquiry, find a way to share your learning with people. I don't see any of that in this sample lessons that I've run across. It's even a joke to mention creativity. That's not something is even considered an important element of school anymore. And I mean, can we use the F word here? I mean, I think school should be fun. I think kids should come on the bus with a smile on their face, and I think we should be driving there with a smile on our face. And if we're not, something's not right.